Have you ever heard of insect politics? Neither have I.
What's up, fellow Forge mates? Welcome to a new interesting idea that I had for a series where we're going to explore metal albums relevant to an artistic narrative or concept. This first episode, we're going to talk about the presence of flies and their symbolism, since the internet has blown up over the fly that was on Mike Pence's head during the vice presidential debate.
Is a great insult.
I thought it would be interesting to explore what a fly represents in novels and art, which is the death and rot of the flesh and the soul. This isn't going to be a political video. Let me get that out of the way right now. And I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about what the fly represents in some well-known artwork and novels, and ultimately explore some death metal records which align with the themes. You can draw your own conclusions to what the fly showing up during Mike Pence's portion of the debate means. Not really that hard to do, given the administration's record to date. First, let's look at the fly in artwork. The common fly is held a symbolic meaning of rot and decay, dating back since medieval times. Flies are believed to have a strong link to the devil, Beelzebub, who is also known as the Lord of the Flies in the New Testament. In Renaissance thought, which typically blended fables and tales with religion, flies were considered associated with evil and corruption due to their nature of being born from decay and rotting matter. In the book of Exodus, a swarm of flies was a form of punishment, as they were harbingers of pestilence and death. One of my favorite examples of evil and decay narrative with respect to novels is within William Golding's The Lord of the Flies. For those who don't know the book, it's about a group of kids stranded on an island who, without parental supervision, encountered the beast within and uncover the primal nature of humanity. The Lord of the Flies is the name of the severed pig's head that Jack places on a sharpened stick as a sacrifice to the beast. In Chapter 8, Simon visits this secluded spot in the forest where he uncovers the ominous pig's head covered in black iridescent flies, and the head seems to have an unsettling grin. Symbolically, the Lord of the Flies represents the presence of evil on the island inside each of the boys, and the severed pig's head is an allegory representing Satan. Secondly, out of all of the representation for flies, the fly is also used as a reminder of impermanence of the physical body and the inevitability of death. The human life is but a small component of the entire passage of time, and the fly's lifespan is but a reminder of that in many artworks. We're supposed to do the most we can with the time that we've been given. It was William Blake that said, "Am not I a fly like thee, or art not thou a man like me?" Meaning that a fly is a reminder of humility. Third, out of all of these symbolisms that we've been talking about, let's focus for a second on the illusion component. Many people watching the debate mentioned getting up from their chairs to swat the fly, despite it not actually being on their screen. This elusive component of the fly tricking a viewer can be seen in early artworks as well as a prank to trick the viewer into thinking that the fly is real on a painting or whatever surface that it's on. There's a well-known legend of a painter, Giotto, fooling his master, Cimabue, by adding a realistic-looking fly to a painting to trick the master into swatting it away. One of the most famous portraits featuring a fly was painted by Petrus Christus in 1446. Depicting a bearded monk with a fly perched on the lower part of the frame. So despite all this nerdiness talking about art and books, what do you think the fly showing up during the debate represents? Let me know in the comments. And with that enormous setup, let's get into some death metal records that hit on the theme of insects, rot, ruin, corruption, and death. For those of you interested, I made a Spotify playlist available in the description. Let me know in the comments, what are some of your favorite death metal records inspired by rot and decay? Let's get into the list of what my picks are for old school death metal bands inside this narrative. The first one on my list is Pestilence, Consuming Impulse, and I saw some really hilarious memes going around of Pestilence, which is, Mike Pence with the fly on him. I don't know, I thought it was fucking hilarious. This album was released in 1989, and it's one of my favorite old school death metal records. This album hits all of the feels of death and decay. The album comes out swinging with tons of sick riffing, and I honestly can't believe how good it is and still holds up today. Here's a clip from the album opener, Dehydrated. Still so fucking good. The album artwork is perfect for the theme. It's a swarm of insects on a horrified face, and I love that the U's on the album name are replaced with V's, which is extra cult. So, fantastic album. Absolutely love this. The next one on my list is Obituary, Slowly We Rot, released in 1989. This album still fucking slays. The album cover has a ton of charm to it, in my opinion, with the illustrative feel, and it's easily one of my favorite old school death metal records. I had to put this album on the list simply because of the album title with Rot in it. Cause of Death is probably my favorite record by Obituary, but it didn't have Rot in the title, so I had to use this one. Here's a clip from the title track, Slowly We Rot. I love the grimy and gross sound of this band. Everything about the atmosphere of this record is so perfect for the narrative of a swarm of fucking flies. Next one on my list is Scream Bloody Gore, released in 1987. This is a genre-defining death metal record in all regards. Scream Bloody Gore is one of my favorites of the entire Death discography. This album is very much in the thrash death vein before they went more progressive, but the album hits on all of the notes of gore, death, decay, the stench of corpses. And if you haven't seen it yet, check out our Death discography ranked episode where we hit all of the albums in detail and then do a final ranking. Here's a clip from my favorite song of the album, Zombie Ritual. The album art is perfect for the mood of the narrative that we were talking about earlier, and I'm sure there's tons of flies in that fucking crypt on the cover. Next one on my list is Cannibal Corpse, Tomb of the Mutilated. If you're my age, you were probably introduced to Cannibal Corpse through Ace Ventura: Pet Detective with Hammer Smashed Face in this well-known scene. This album is brutal as hell and easily my favorite of the entire discography. I don't really connect much to the gore-obsessed death metal records, but this album is just too good to ignore. Here's a clip from The Cryptic Stench. That album art is equal parts awful as it is iconic to old school death metal. Check this record out if you haven't yet. It's awesome. Next one I have here is Suffocation, Effigy of the Forgotten. This was released in 1991. Easily one of my favorite death metal records of all time. Every riff is fucking amazing. And I'd argue that Suffocation started a lot of what would become slam death metal much later on. The album art supports the Born from Death narrative with a massive machine consuming organic matter around it to incubate its new breed of life. Here's a clip from Infecting the Crypts. So many great songs on this album. These guys just rip in every fucking way. I love this record. Give it a spin if you haven't heard it in a while. Next one on my list is Repulsion, Horrified, released in 1989. I know this isn't death metal, it's grindcore, so don't get all nerdy on me, but in my opinion, it's still fitting for this list. The entire album feels like a swarm of flies and insects with its production, and the album art is nothing but death and decay in the best way. This album feels like if Slayer started using harsh vocals, and honestly, it's my favorite way to think about Repulsion. Here's a clip from Pestilent Decay. This is so ahead of its time. I can't believe it came out in 1989. A lot of people haven't heard Repulsion, and that's a fucking shame. Make sure you fix that. Check these guys out. Next one on my list is Entombed, Left Hand Path, released in 1990. Man, the amount of times that I have listened to this record, that iconic HM2 chainsaw guitar tone is just the best fucking thing ever in death metal, in my opinion. So many bands are still emulating this sound today. That's how important this album is. And I still don't get sick of it. This album is genre defining and so unbelievably atmospheric, and it's easily one of the best death metal records of the 90s. Here's a clip from Supposed to Rot. I fucking love that chainsaw guitar tone, and it's one of the reasons why I bought an HM2 guitar pedal. One of my favorite things ever. The last one on my list, but certainly not the least, is Bloodbath, Nightmares Made Flesh, released in 2002. Definitely the most recent record on my list, but I couldn't leave Bloodbath off this playlist as they're one of my favorite death metal bands of all time. I love all of their records, but this album, in my opinion, is most reminiscent of the death and decay narrative we were talking about earlier. That HM2 chainsaw guitar tone is in your face, and Peter's vocals on this record are so fucking terrifying that it's just one of my favorites. I personally love all of the vocals that this band has had throughout their entire discography, but there's something about the atmosphere of this record that feels like death and decay, and Peter's vocals are just so horrifying that it supports it even more. Here's a clip from their most well-known song, Eaten. There's a ton of bangers on this album. One of the best death metal records ever, in my opinion. Totally unrelated, but me and my wife and some friends actually covered the song Eaten a few months ago. Check out the link in the description and give it a spin. It's on my other YouTube channel. So that's it for my Death, Rot, and Decay death metal playlist inspired by the fly on Mike Pence during the debate. I think that fly is probably one of the most popular things right now in American culture, and that's pretty fucking pathetic. But you know, I figured I'd take the opportunity to talk art and novels and some death metal that overlaps with that narrative. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Be sure to throw us a subscribe and help us hit that 1,000 sub milestone. In the words of Seth Brundle from The Fly, the 1986 version.
I'm saying I'm an insect who dreamt he was a man and loved it.
Good night, folks.